Hey, welcome everybody. I'm James Mays, and this is the How to Play in a Band podcast. I'm here with my favorite new band, and I call them new band only because I just found out about them. These guys are incredible musicians. I really want you to hear them live. It's so worth it. And I'm really happy to bring in these dudes. These guys are such dudes that it's hard to imagine that I'm sitting here with them because they're so flipping cool. Damian and Gian and Dylan from JeTexas. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Austin band,
Hello.
tell us a little bit about your individual stories of music, how you got together. I want to hear from everybody. So let's start with Gian.
All right. I guess I can start with saying I've been playing bass since I was 12. So that's quite some time now. I've grown up with rock and roll, Beatles, Hendrix, Cream. I have two older brothers. We have a band as well called Amplified Heat. But with that, I've been doing that since I was 10, 12 years old and just haven't stopped playing music. Self-taught. Just by listening to records and watching footage of old bands and stuff like that, and trying to mimic what they do and stuff. And then we moved to Austin from Houston. All three of us were here like in '99, and then that's when we started hitting the Austin music scene. And then I started playing with other musicians because you're playing with the same people for so long, it kind of becomes just one thing. And I felt like I started getting better when I started playing with other people that had different styles or different approaches to things and stuff, and just kind of broadened my scope of how to approach the instrument, how to approach the bass. And so that's what I've been doing, just been playing around with a bunch of people, and got with these guys about a couple of years ago, and it's been really nice and refreshing to be something that is as creative as it is. Because you could be doing something for a long time and just kind of come up to a kind of not a dead end, but it just kind of gets routine or whatnot. But it's also a nice feeling to be able to find some other musicians that you really click with and can really bring stuff out of you that you didn't think you had or you've been wanting to do, and that kind of stuff.
Nice. Okay, thanks. Who's next? Dylan?
Yeah, sure. I started playing guitar when I was 7, and I have an older brother. He's 2 years older, and it was actually his idea to get involved with guitar. So him, me, and my dad all started playing at the same time, which was kind of cool, And they did it a few years and then stopped, and I just kind of kept at it. And pretty early into when I started playing, my dad gave me some AC/DC CDs, and especially High Voltage right off the bat. Like I was like hooked immediately, it's like really like a religious experience or something, and it's really cool. So right away I had that interest, and that kind of, I think that immediate spark of excitement carried me through some of the more grueling processes of learning an instrument, because it's not always fun, especially right out of the gate, like anything when you're developing those earlier essential skills. But I just kept at it. And then when I was in high school, I had a friend named Matt who played bass. And by that time I was into blues. I had found blues really by way of that rock and roll I was introduced to. I first heard Elmore James. I was on YouTube one day, must have been about 12 years old, and I heard Elmore James do a song called Blues Before Sunrise, and it was another one of those moments, like it was kind of like another, so then the next thing was off. And so in high school I had taught my buddy Matt some old Jimmy Reed songs, and we went around the DFW area playing as a duo, and did that. I graduated high school and came down to Austin, and then so was in the blues scene down here. And that's how I first got to know Damian and be playing with Damian. Actually, we were playing some blues gigs together. I was already familiar with Damian before I came to town because I was a big fan of a guy named Nick Curran, and I knew Damian was very close with Nick and played with him. And So it's really cool how tight we've gotten, just, yeah. So after the blues thing, Damien introduced me to Gian, and that's kind of how this thing took off.
Damien, you want to chime in? Tell us your story.
Yeah, it's hard to follow those two, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But my dad is a drummer, and my dad always says, I never told him what to do or how to do it, but he kind of did just by being associated with him. There was drums in the house all the time. He was had records on, and he was always at gigs. So I just follow him around, even as a youngster. Learned how to play pool early because I was always in the bars with him. Then I learned how to play drums with and sit down with him, and he'd get me on. If he played a 16-year-old dance, back home in Corpus Christi, they call them quinceañeras. He'd do a lot of those. He'd get me up because they were so boring to him, just playing like a bolero. Boom, boom. He'd just say, just go up there and play it. I don't want to go hang out with your mom. And I'm like, okay, I'll go up there and play. So I got hip to doing stuff like that with my dad. He also gave me records, made me learn Beatles stuff, made me listen to Buddy Rich. And by that point, I was getting into a fine art school as an elementary student. And I had a heads up. I already knew how to play the drums because my dad had taught me. And so I tried out and played for the little elementary school band, fine arts band. That went all the way through high school, just learning how to play, learning how to march, learning symphonic band, classical music. And then I came to Austin with a surf band and got tight with the Continental Club, that whole lot. And with that, I got an offer from a guy named Deke Dickerson out of Los Angeles. And that was my first way to get out of Austin or even out of Texas. And I started touring with him. So since then, maybe 1999, I've been a touring musician. I toured with people like Marcia Ball and Nick Kern, as he said, was just straight blues stuff that took me all over the world. It was really nice to do that. Then through the scene, I'd known Gian. And then when we all kind of got together, me and Dylan had been playing, and I noticed that me and Dylan kind of had the same vocabulary playing that I had already had with Nick at one point. And that's where I noticed that we could play together. We kind of know each other's ins and outs. It's hard to explain. He knows the rhythm almost before I'm going to do it, and then I feel it. And I said, man, what would be great is if we got my friend Gian in here, because Gian is pure gut and pure ear. It's not about theory. It's just about he can hear what's going on. So that's how we all kind of got together, In short.
In short.
Man, that's so cool. There's so many questions I want to ask you. First, about Gian, just like the tone of your bass and the attitude in your play that you bring to this 3-piece is so like, I'm sure non-musicians might get it, but musicians, we definitely get, what it is that you're doing. You seem so just like chill and laid back there, but you're playing like really challenging parts, and the tone that you got, that like late 60s, just fuzzy sound. It's just so like, psychedelic and awesome. Talk a little bit about like how you found your tone with this band, because we all know it's different. Each act requires a different tone, a different attitude, a different attack, different style. Sometimes you're playing up front, sometimes you're laying back. How do you approach it with these guys?
Well, I have to say I got lucky understanding tone early on when I moved to Austin. My brothers and I were very much, like I said, we were like Hendrix freaks, especially, and we wanted Marshall stacks, or we wanted Fender stuff, but with the big cabinets and stuff like that. And that's what I happened to get, because it was available. It was cheap back then. Nobody wanted these big 215 cabinets and stuff like that. And once I found that sound, immediately I was just like, holy shit, this is it. Oh, sorry, can I say that here?
Yeah, you could say it,
all
man. Right. This is how to play in a band.
All right. I know kids watching. Anyways, so with that being said, I've always kind of had people always mention my tone because I don't use pedals. I play straight through the amp. It's always a tube amp for the most part.
Mhm.
It's always usually 215s. I have gotten into Marshalls doing 412s as well with a Marshall head, kind of old school, you know. I mean, no Redding, John Entwistle, Don, well, not, no, he didn't use a Marshall. Donald the Duck Dunn, from Booker T and the MGs. There's footage of them in Europe, and he's playing through a stack, but both cabinets are side by side. It's just like, wow, look at that tone that they have, you know, off of using these Marshall stacks. So having that, when we got JeTexas together, I kind of we went through several bases that I had. We went through several configurations and stuff. And it's still taking me somewhere to get at least a tone live. But recording, I was going through what sounds good. And I was aware this is for the recording. It's not for live, you know, so I was very much focused on what kind of sound I wanted with JeTexas, it being a 3-piece. And on top of that, all the melodic presence there, you know, there's so many melodies going on. I kind of knew that the bass had to be a bit upfront, but not overpowering anything. So that's where I kind of, you know, we went more for the mid-range sound, and the Rickenbacker worked best. There's a lot of clarity with those basses as opposed to the Gibsons that I have. I have Gibson EB3 and an EB2 and EBO. And so we just kind of were going through those sounds. I'm still trying to figure it out, really. But on the record, I think we did a pretty good job of finding good tones for the songs in particular, because I think each song might have like a different bass. I'm using a Japanese copy jazz bass on Good Days, I believe. I think that's also on Hambone and Wake and Shake. So I think, like I said, musicians will be able to hear that, like, oh yeah, he's using a different bass there or whatnot, you know. But yeah, I just kept that in mind as far as like just being tonally rich with everything else, because Dylan has such great tone, and it's kind of like trying to match that. And then Damien tunes high, so you kind of keep that in mind too, and stuff like that, how it all kind of comes together, where you can hear everything clearly and presently, but nothing's trampling over each other. So that was kind of the aim towards the tone.
I love hearing that. Damien, let's go down the tone rabbit hole with you, man, because you're like plugging straight into the amp. There's no pedals. Is there a tuner? Are you even using a tuner pedal?
No, I do
Yeah, that's right. You've got the on the neck. And you're getting this awesome tone. Like you get so much tone out of and a lot of that has to do with, you know, your level of play is extraordinary. We all know that. There you go. Bow down to Damien for a moment.
Don't say that too much.
Right. Yeah, you want to keep you a little humble. But by the way, as total side note, Andy Tenberg from Tomar and the FCs told me to tell you hi when I told him that I was going to be seeing you guys today.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about that, because you know, Gion's talking about tone and how it all fits in. How do you guys? What's your approach to that? And let's talk a little bit about the difference in your live shows to recording, and what are the variables that you take into consideration so people can really be thinking about that themselves.
Yeah. Well, as far as just kind of the simplicity of the rig, have had it that way for quite a while. You know, I'm, you know, fortunate to have a nice guitar and a nice amp, you know, so anything else, I just feel like dilutes the purity of that kind of tone. Because, you know, getting like my first experience with music being AC/DC and stuff like that, before I could probably put my finger on it, I was picking up on the tone of all those instruments involved because of the recording process, you know, Angus and Malcolm, you know, and so tone has always been very crucial. All my heroes had tone, you know, and so anyway, but I guess I really just plug in just for the simplicity's sake. The few times I've messed around with pedals and stuff, they never seem to work right for me. There's always a glitch somewhere, just like little things. And I've taken that as a prompting to simplify, you know.
Yeah, the ethos is telling you, giving you signals, you're picking
Yeah.
up on them.
Totally, so that's, and I run the amp real hot, and I control it on the guitar. I'm always manipulating the volume of the guitar. You can get a lot of variation that way, and when the amp's hot, you have a wide spectrum of tone you can get. It's gonna get dirty, but you can be clean, and
Don't tell too many people.
yeah, I know.
Let's geek out on your like knob technique on your guitar here for a second, because these are crucial points for guitar players, like, because you are getting a lot of different tones, like you're getting these sweet clean tones. And listeners, I've only heard this band once, so I'm just picking up on one show at the Hole in the Wall where the PA is okay, and the room sounds pretty noisy and pretty loud. And it's hard to penetrate and get really good sounds out of a lot of stages, but the Hole in the Wall is no exception, this legendary venue in Austin. But you get these sweet tones, like sweet, pure, cleaner tones. And then you get this bite out of it, this grit. So talk about how you're doing that.
Yeah, it all comes down to a lot of it has to be in your hands. Like, I could maintain the same everything for the whole show and probably still achieve that. I mostly do. I'm not messing with the controls much at all. Even when it gets softer and delicate, that's pretty much just in how I'm picking, But so that's the most important part, obviously. And then besides that, I'm going back and forth between my fingers and a pick a lot throughout the songs. So that probably has to do with that too. You can get a lot more subtlety, I've found, for me at least, with your fingers sometimes when it comes to the, so there's that. And then the other factor, like I said, is manipulating the volume via the guitar, and I don't ever go and mess with anything else throughout the show. And yeah, I keep the guitar I'm playing too is kind of special. It's a Strat, but I've put some humbuckers in it, and that's that has to do with it too. I started with one humbucker in the bridge position because one of my big heroes, he's big inspiration, I think, for this band. The MC5. Wayne Kramer played a Strat with a humbucker in the bridge, and it's a cool ass guitar all around. Like, it's painted like the American flag. Like, it was like, this is like 66 or something like that, maybe 67. So this, nowadays it's more common, but back then this was really cool, So anyway, I did that with my Strat, and then I ended up putting two more. So I got 3 humbuckers in there, and I never mess with them anyway. I'm always on the bridge, but if I wanted to, I could get a lot of sound.
Yeah, somebody call it a Les Paul in disguise, right?
Yeah, it's like, I think it's what I've heard Johnny Winter describe why he liked the Firebird, maybe. And if that's what he said, I like how a Strat plays. Like Gibson, kind of sometimes a little more of the body that a Gibson has because of the electronics, and so it's really the perfect guitar for me. I've been in I use it for everything. I bring other guitars to shows, but that's all. I keep them back there just in case I break a string. Otherwise, there's no reason to change guitars ever for me.
I mean, he even said the same.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna put a humbucker in my Strat. Totally, because I love that Gibson tone from the humbucker. It's just
Totally, man.
That's so great. Sorry, I interrupted you, Gian. What were you saying?
Oh no, but I was gonna say, like, there's been times where he's borrowed other guitars and stuff like that, and he sounds the same. He sounds like another amp. He'll be playing through a Gorilla amp, and he would sound the same, and so it's like, a lot of it is in the fingers, and like just watching him play. And like I said, I'm a Hendrix freak, and I've been listening to live Hendrix tracks since I was a kid. I could tell you what year it is and what show it was and what he was wearing and shit like that. So never have I played with another guitarist that brings those sensibilities. He's not doing Hendrix stuff on stage, but he's got that direction, that sensibility of like just how to make it talk. He's making that guitar talk, really. And there's inflections in people's voices. They get higher, they get lower, they're smooth, they're sharp and stuff like that. So it's really cool to hear somebody really bring that out of the guitar, especially here in Austin, Texas. That's like tons of guitars everywhere.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up that distinction, because there is I love that element of communicating through an instrument as like it's a speaking voice.
Mhm.
And that includes the space that you leave, because there's always pauses in people's
Right.
cadence, and those creating more interesting lines in doing that, and like intentionally having something to say, like saying it through that. And it does take a tremendous amount of sensitivity in order to be able to do that. So everybody keep practicing. So Damien, yeah, talk about like, I just wanted to say, I remember I played some shows with Marcia Ball back in the 80s, my
Oh,
band
wow.
at the old Maggie Mays. Yeah.
No
Back
kidding.
in like 87, Marcia Ball. She's
Sweetheart, yeah.
amazing. I love her. Yeah, I see her around town every once in a while. I saw her at Ham recently. Yeah, she's great. Right, just legend, and doesn't get enough props, really. Like,
Well,
she's
just recently, I think she got inducted into one of the something Hall of Fame. Might have been the Texas thing that just happened here in Austin. the
okay.
Austin-
Good.
So,
Yeah.
Bless her, because she got something, and yeah, she's a great person, good businesswoman, and ambassador, musical ambassador, all
Yeah,
over.
and so much a part of what makes the Austin music scene tick. She's just been down in the trenches so many years. So
Yeah.
unsung hero for sure.
She really was like instrumental in the housing for musicians and helping Ham and doing all
Yeah,
those things.
so good. And I was young and this cocky lead singer, and I remember leaning over to my bass player and going, "Who the hell's Marcia Ball? Like, what?" he was like, "Dude, take a lesson."
Yeah,
So
she's
I
cool.
woke up
When I
very
got
quick.
that gig, it was the first time I'd had a salary gig, and she offered me
Yeah.
a salary gig retainer, and it was a really sought after gig back in 2029, or even before that. But when I joined her in 2009 or 2010,
Yeah.
and it was really, I was like, okay, I'll take this. This is great, and
Nice.
traveled all over the world with her for 5 years.
Nice. Okay, I want there's so many conversations that I want to have with you guys. So much information here, like touring with a band and some download that, but I want to keep it here with JeTexas right now. So yeah, talk about a little bit like how you guys communicate on stage, because you're behind the kit, you play with a ferocious intensity, like physical conditioning is got to be part of your routine, right? Like staying fit, because you're nonstop.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think I've just gotten so used to doing it and conserving my energy in different ways.
And he's on the Peloton.
There's because I see other guys who are wailing about and doing all this stuff, and then after a while you can't hear them anymore. They're just trying to. But I think the communication here is that we try to be a little bit more dynamic. We're still trying to figure it out as well, but. Yeah, you're right. Drummer does not stop. We do not stop. What's good about JeTexas is there's some interludes, there's some pauses, so there's some times to catch your breath, because we write in that fashion. However, yeah, it's but I'm playing off these two. It feels, it's kind of a dream come true. Always trying to get a band that has just sheer natural tone with these guys, the way they play with their fingers and the way they just plug in. I've never had that before, but I've played with a lot of people throughout my career, but knowing that these guys can just work with their fingers and the way they do it and the sensibilities that we have, I don't feel tired. I don't feel like I'm overworking. I can rely on Gian a lot. I can rely on him and vice versa. But when the time comes for me to like pull it out and try to do something more, I'm concerned. My energy is going to be there, because I've found ways to kind of like figure it out to play with these guys. It's a different way, because there's other bands where I'm playing all night and I'm tired or I'm sweating. These guys, it's just like fun. We're up there having a great time and communicating and playing off of each other, and knowing each other so well, just I think helps with the energy. And it may seem like I'm doing a lot, but I feel great up there. It's one of the easiest, funnest bands I've ever played in.
Really relaxed, really at ease, and intense. So so two things I want to talk about. One is that communication that you guys have on stage, and some of the ways that you're tuning into each other. But first, I want to ask you about No, I don't, because I've totally forgot that other question now. So let's just go with that one. Like the way that you guys communicate on stage, right? There's sensitivities involved, but break it down so that people who don't have that experience, or maybe even are just starting to play in a band and don't really understand all those sensibilities, break it down to what you're actually doing. Where is your focus and your concentration while you're doing that? How are you able to stay in your zone, but have their sound and tone enter in so that it's kind of part of the whole fabric? What are your little tricks to doing that?
We listen to each other, I think. That's the big one. You know, we're very much aware of the big picture of what, not just what ourselves are putting out, but what we're putting out collectively. And that's actually allowed for us to learn how to play our instruments and sing at the same time. Dylan already knows how to do that, but me and Damien have had to work on that and stuff. But I think it's that whole having an open ear the entire time and listening to what Dylan's doing, listening to what Damien's doing. Because, you know, especially after a while, you kind of know and can predict where certain people are going to go with stuff like that. There's certain little nuances in their playing where you can kind of, oh, that's where you're going. I know where you're going. I'll catch on there with you, you know, and stuff like that. But that wouldn't happen if I was just listening to myself and just, you know, concerned with what I sound like. I'm very much concerned with how they sound too. If Dylan's loud enough or too loud, or the same thing with Damien and stuff, and try to have that dynamic and just being aware.
Yeah. It's good. I remember during rehearsals, we talked about when we were just a 3-piece, and we talked about like we could have bass, drums, and guitar and vocals go out separately, but I like to think of it as we get together on stage and it goes out as one. And I think that involves us playing around each other, playing with each other in cohesion and harmony. That's what we miss today in today's music, to me, is playing in harmony. First off, you know, people are not writing middle eights where you have to learn how to play with a guitarist or a vocal and do something different from the song. People aren't learning intros or pre-choruses and outros, and it's forcing us to be a little bit more musical and to try. I mean, because we did that on the album very well, but doing it live, we made a decision. We talked about it. We're going to have to get this across live. So the lines, the counterpoints are well thought of. Dylan, Gian, me, we thought of the stuff that we're going to be able to play as a trio live together, that we're going to get a good sound that represents the album. And that involves listening to each other, knowing each other, practicing, you know, and all the different influences that we've had come across, you know, his with rock, and his with blues, mine with blues and a little bit of soul, and even some classical, like I was mentioning, learning when I was young. That helps so much, being dynamic with a you know, as if you're playing a symphony, you know, or you know, and that's the way I take it. That's the way I listen to it, listen to these guys. But yeah, the sheer tone is what kind of makes this thing happen to me, is and just to know how we play, listening to each other on stage.
How would you, Damien, before we move on to Dylan, like the tone, like talk about, like, as an artist, we sort of intuitively just sense what's happening around us all the time, but especially on stage and when we're performing and when we're listening like that. If you could describe what happens in your body that allows you to do it, or what do you hear? Where's your focus in your hearing that allows you to just be open like that and step into that?
It's hard to say. I really don't have the answer. I can say is just familiarity, learning song, learning where they went, learning songs growing up. I mean, we talk about our touchstones like Cream and Hendrix. All those guys were listening to the music, pop music of that time, and their father's music and their father's music and blues and stuff like that, that had some kind of way. There was tone, counterpoint, all those things. And I think your brain, knowing those songs growing up, and you kind of want to emulate that. That's what I hear. I'm listening for, oh, here's a melody line. I can get into this. And if I can dance to it, and if I can feel it, I think that makes it, we're not the best dancers, but we can kind of move our shoulders, and that's when that's when you feel like, oh, I'm having fun here, and things are happening. But I think it's a knowing of older style music, and then that ear picks up on it. I don't think we could get that if we were listening to modern music, to be honest with you. Learning song structure and knowing where it's going and how you're going to feel it, and how to drive a band and say, okay, well, if I make this segue here, I know this guy's going to go into a solo and rock it, because he feels where I'm going. Same with Dylan. I mean, same with Jan. And we all, that's, it's like an ear thing, I would have to say.
An ear thing. Okay.
Ear to brain to heart and then gut, and then you go for it,
Yeah, it's definitely an ear thing, I think, of like I try to listen to the monitor as if it were like I'm listening to something on the radio, like something that's already recorded, but I'm creating it right there. And then, so that's where my headspace is, because that allows me to hear everything and to kind of like, just pretend that like, oh, this is already recorded. It's coming to the speakers. I'm just listening to it, playing along with it, see if I could nail it, so it's just kind of like that. It's a little game I play sometimes.
That's how we learn, probably playing to the radio and CDs and cassettes and albums,
Love it. I love it.
Ear stuff.
Dylan, how about you?
Yeah, as far as whenever we play, the communication, it's definitely one of those things that can't really put my finger on. It's like a lot of time, I think what they said is very true. A lot of it is like, you learn just like y'all were saying, you kind of talk on the guitar, Gian talks on the bass and Damien talks on the drums, very like they're literally saying things, and it's a different language, but we have established a kind of familiarity and dialogue from there, which is just something very magical or something, and so there's that. And then when we're on stage too, I don't know, there's nothing that I ever deliberately do to put myself in the state, but everyone has a different way. But I really, it comes from a higher power, in my opinion. Like, for some reason, when we're on stage, like, we're doing something necessary. Whatever we're communicating is healing and sacred, and
that's the answer you want. This is the answer you want.
Well, I want all the answers. They're all beautiful in their own way. Like, because you got Dylan with the sacred answer, which I totally resonate with, of course. And then you've got Damien with the like ear, brain, heart, gut. Like, oh my God, breaking that down to the science of it, right? Yeah, so good. And then just the feel, just Gian, just the feel, and just literally listening, like just that function of using your senses. Just listen. I've got a little tip that I like to show people. There's a difference, like and it's an eye focus game. When you focus on any object, just pick any object and look at it specifically, you see it. Now you're, for the most part, engaging your left brain, your logical brain. You're like, this is a red light, I need to stop brain. And when you open your focus to see your peripheral vision, you notice how you can hear all the white noise in the room much easier, and you're not focused on one thing, you're focused on everything. And I like to try to direct artists to be in that state when performing. Like, you need focus when you're learning, so left brain when you're learning, but it's got to be right brain when you're performing, because you have to be open to all of those senses, at the same time. So you're focusing on everything, but not just one thing. It's kind of a quick literal way to feel it, like, oh, okay, fine. And then peripheral vision, and you can hear it, you feel it, your back of your neck relaxes, you just like, oh yeah, okay.
It's kind of like martial arts too,
Yeah.
show you to, like, when you're sparring with somebody, you look at their chest, and that way you can see what this arm is going to do, what this arm is going to do, instead of looking at their face or their hands or whatever, and it's kind of the same thing. It opens up your senses, and
that's right.
And you look at things in a broader scope, and yeah, it's a much clearer picture,
Sensei Gian.
Hey. Oh yeah.
Right on. Okay. So let's move on to let's talk about like anything that you could tell somebody who's trying to take their band to the next level, whether it's the way you play together as a band or some business stuff that like you're dealing with now that's a challenge, and encouragement on how to navigate it. Go for it. What comes to mind?
Open communication is one for any level, whether it be artistically or on the business aspect and stuff, and and learn how to communicate with each other and not get butthurt, especially when it comes to songwriting and playing together and stuff, and realizing when somebody tells you, hey, you're too loud or you're playing too fast or whatever it is, that it's more for the benefit of the song, not because they don't like the way you're playing, or they have something against the way you play. It's just more, there's a time and a place, right, for whatever it is. And what we're doing is that it's definitely a necessary thing for us to be very open with each other and be open with the communication, open with our feelings of like, hey, I'm not feeling that, or I am feeling this. I'm feeling we should do this. Maybe we shouldn't do that, and kind of just hear each other out and stuff. Because in the end, you come up to an agreement and then everybody's okay with it, regardless, especially with songwriting, where it's like, if everybody's ideas are heard and given a chance, as long as everyone is going for the bottom line, which is the song, then everybody's going to end up liking that song because they've put in the effort into it. They've had their ideas heard, maybe used, maybe not used, but there was a consensus that like the way the song ends up is the way the song should be, and everybody's in agreement to it, and then the song's fun to play in that regard. It's like, because you have something to do with it.
So communication style, important, right? And everybody's got a different one. So tell me, like, so Damien's playing something you're not feeling. How do you say it to him?
Hey, cut that out. No, actually, no, it's actually very, I mean, we will banter at each other out of fun. It's never really, we actually really have a good time whenever we're writing. It's a lot of fun for us. But yeah, it would be a thing where I would stop it like, hey, I hear this, why don't you try this? And the good thing between actually this band, like there's bass lines that Dylan wrote, that Damien wrote, there's drum lines that I pitched in, like, hey, you should do this there and stuff like that, and that, it goes back to like, what are you writing for? Are you writing for yourself, or are you writing for the song, or writing for the song and stuff like that. So that's how I usually do approach it, is like, hey man, that sounds great, but let's try this, or let's see what this sounds like,
So when we're coaching bands, we talk, this concept is about humility. What I'm hearing you say is like having the humility to recognize that, hey, this isn't about me, this is about the song, and there's feedback coming back that I might not like, or I like this part that I'm playing, but he's saying, no, try this. So, okay, I'm going to give it a try, right? Easier to say, easier to try that thing and find out that it works or doesn't work than to resist it and argue and be,
and then that builds tension and resentment, and
right.
Like, I hate this guy.
Right.
That's what tell me what.
So Dylan, I don't know you guys very well. I'm just getting to know you, but Dylan, I would peg you as kind of the most soft spoken of the group.
Oh yeah, we just lead them around the water,
which is also because you're the lead singer too. Like once you're on stage, you're the most outspoken, but in a group, you're the most. So my experience is sometimes soft-spoken people have a little more anxiety around potentially confronting the other band members with like, hey, try this, or I don't like that, or da 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 da. Can you explain some of the ways that you use to cope with that and to speak up for yourself?
Yeah, how do you explain that?
Well, I think it's one thing that works in my favor, or that's nice about this group, is that I can like I trust these guys' taste so much that a lot of times, just through experience of writing with them, I've learned to trust what they're suggesting. I usually end up going with it over what I initially planned to do there. So that makes it easier for me to be a little less vocal sometimes, because maybe you're right, maybe I have a bit more of a tendency to just kind of roll with things. But I'm in an environment where it usually behooves me to roll with things, which is cool. And then there's certain ideas, of course, where I feel strongly enough about it to be a little more insistent, but it never takes much prompting for any of us to try something that someone else suggests. So I very seldom feel like I need to assert myself very much, which is cool with these guys. It's like, but of course, when it comes to reluctance to communicate, I think more than anything that I notice that, and I have to be aware of that when I'm just communicating an idea. Of sometimes if you're really putting it all out there for the song, sometimes you're going to kind of feel silly, or you're going to end up, in my opinion, because you're really putting anything in you that can be very private out there for everyone, and you're trying to do it in a pretty way. You're really opening yourself up. So that's more than anything, that's whenever I feel in the process like a tendency to bite my tongue. And and then
Wait, what? No.
So what do you do when you're feeling that tendency to bite your tongue and that you need to speak up?
I just speak up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I
you're
can
hearing that, listeners?
Dog gets
Just,
square.
just, just do it. Just speak up.
at the end of the day, I don't think I just speak up when it comes down to it, and that's important. At the end of the day, everyone has different personality types, but in my little bit of experience, I'm learning that certain things, you just got to say it if you want other people to understand it. And at times when I don't say something and just hold on to it, that's still there, and that's building up some kind of presence always, and that's not always so healthy, so it's for the sake of everyone to express yourself, but it can be very selfless to express yourself too,
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that perspective, that spin on it. It can be very selfless to express yourself. You're right, because it doesn't have to be about you and your fear of expressing it. It can be about the bigger picture, the band, the success of the band, the song itself. Yeah. Nice. Love it. Okay. So you leaned into being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Playing something a little more sensitive and tender. And so I like to talk a little bit about musical vulnerability. It means something different to everybody. So I'm curious, when you even hear that term, what you each think about that, and how would you use a heightened level of vulnerability, or a deeper level of like intimacy, to make great music and to help your band be more successful? What do you do there?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. I'm still trying to grasp on that.
Oh man. Okay. That's either a really good question or I asked it really horribly. Okay, let's see. So I find that in music, in creating art, in creating something that is going to speak to other people, like to an audience, right? To help move them along. One of our roles as artists is to reach into the ether and pull, with our antennas, because we're highly sensitive beings, and to pull these ideas and these concepts and these experiences out and to shape them into something that can communicate an idea. And the beauty of music is that that's very abstract. Like, it doesn't always have to be words, it's feel and tone and all that sort of thing. So, and it requires a level of vulnerability in order to translate that and to speak it out. I call that musical vulnerability. And I'm always curious how musicians use their vulnerability to create something beautiful. So talk to us a little bit about how you get over yourself, find that humility, and are able to do that so easily and naturally?
I mess up all the time, so that keeps me pretty humble, you know. But I also, since I started playing, I was never really fearful of messing up. I'm worried about messing up, but and then I would do really silly things, like do like these huge slides, like John Entwistle slides and stuff, and like just try to land on the right note, you know, without knowing theoretically where my finger should be or whatever. I just kind of hear it or feel it or whatever. And then when I started getting lucky and hitting the right note, I was like, okay, I can do this. It's just a matter of like, it's a physical thing, right? Like where my hand will go, how much thrust I put behind whatever it is that I'm doing, and then I land on that note. And I think that lots of times for a lot of years, I'd get really nervous on stage. Like I wouldn't say stage fright, but stage nerves like crazy. And then I get inside my head, and then I start messing up. And then it's like, okay, no, like now I'm messing up too much and that stuff, and learning to let that go and being okay with like, hey, like whatever you do has got to be musical, you know, because that's what you're doing. That's how I'm communicating is with music, and being okay with, you know, you can make mistakes sound cool, you know, and just Richie Blackmore would do it all the time. He hit a wrong note and he just bend it up till it was right, you know, and that kind of thing. And just, I don't know, I guess that's where I feel there's vulnerability in what I do, like just this constant worry that I'm messing up too much or whatever. And instead of being like, you know, I know how to play this song. There's no reason to be messing up. And if I do figure it out and get back on the horse, just keep going. So
Nice.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Dylan, how about you? How do you use your vulnerability to create great art?
Yeah, I think like anything, it's a if you're like creating is like anything, so it's something you're always getting better at. And the getting better at creating is such a vague kind of thing. It's different for everyone. But for me, it's learning to know yourself a little better just by sheer introspection, and then taking a bit more, I don't know how exactly, but the more you do it, I guess, you learn to take a little bit more assurance in what you feel and the validity of expressing it to other people. And I think what really helps me with that is having like heroes, you know, like when you're writing songs, for me, I feel like I'm usually being most vulnerable when it comes to lyrics. And I just have to look at my heroes, like, you know, people like John Lennon, you know, like he's very, very vulnerable, saying like I'm a loser and things like that. Like if I were to initially want to say that, my first thought would be, man, this sounds like whiny, or it sounds like I'm just kind of like me. But like it turns out if you're like John and you mean it in whatever way he meant it, there's so much conviction. If you have the conviction,
Yeah,
I take that from like Bob Dylan too. It's like sheer conviction, you know, and I'm only learning to develop conviction by doing it all the time and identifying myself as a writer, a creator. You know, I think you got to, without being too cheesy, you got to really live it. You wake up in the morning and you go to bed at night. You're always in it, you know? So, you know, that's where I'm learning to manipulate and work with my vulnerability, you know? And vulnerability is probably very good to have in there because it just keeps you kind of aware of things. So yeah, it's just something I'm always working on. I would just say, I would encourage anyone who's feeling vulnerable to keep at it and trust that vulnerability. It's like a kind of fuel, and it's a muscle you got to develop, you know, and it'll help you. So it's very important to be vulnerable. Other people benefit, you know, because other people are vulnerable too, but not everyone can express it. So sometimes if you put your vulnerability out there, that's the magic. Then someone else, that one person, even if it's such a powerful communication when two vulnerabilities meet like that. Like, I don't know why whatever, you know, James Brown is expressing connects with me. I can't put my finger on it, but something, he's laying it out there and I'm picking it up, you know, and it's got to really lay it down. So yeah, you know, you got to have heroes.
Love that. Damien, how about you? How do you express vulnerability in music?
I think this band it's a situational thing for me because I've done other bands where I'm basically the monkey behind the drums playing other people's parts. But I mean, this band in its nature is vulnerable because it's original music. It came from Dylan, where chord progressions and lyrics are the ultimate vulnerability. He's given us an insight of himself.
Mm.
So we're kind of just forced with that. We're kind of like, oh, we gotta match this, you know, and having the vulnerability on stage, if we're talking about it, you know, there's no hiding. We're a three-piece. And again, we have to we're already out there. You know, if we decide we have a gig tomorrow, I'm already getting ready for the vulnerability, you know, I'm like, because I gotta get out there, I gotta get 2 drums out there. People are expecting to hear this and hear that, and you just gotta do it. But I don't know, we talked about nerves, we talked about vulnerability. I think all that is necessary for us to go. Getting this band up and off the ground, we're already vulnerable. We're up against it, period, because of today's music and management and I mean all kinds of business stuff. So there's so much. We're already vulnerable enough to be out there, especially with the words, with the music and playing live and trying to deliver what we conceived as like, oh, here we're gonna match these people haven't heard this song, but we're confident enough to do it, and we're gonna make you feel it, you know, just like you said, we have something to say. So it's out there. The next time we play, I'm already getting ready for my next. I'm like, okay, we're nerves, and I'm gonna be out there. People are gonna be watching. I'm right there in the front of the stage. People are looking at you. There's no hiding. There's no hiding visually or orally. Everybody's looking at us. So it's kind of like we're always on. Just like you said, we're always on it. You know what I mean? Listening, thinking about it, listening to music immediately when you go to sleep. When you wake up, you're playing it or practicing or listening to music. We just live it. You know, we're always in it. The vulnerability state seems like it, and trying to get this band off the ground is like really an exercise in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's talk about a little bit of that. Let's shift gears then, because we get a lot of questions from people in our How to Play in a Band course, like about booking. You know, a lot of people struggle with booking. Maybe they've got a band that sounds good, that they like, but they just they're struggling getting it out there or getting with the right bookers or getting, you know, the club. Talk about some of your challenges there and how you've overcome them.
Well, one of the biggest challenges here in Austin is setting your value, really, and then not overbooking yourself. I think there's a small window when you're a new band that you can book yourself and be pretty successful at it. But then it gets to a point where, like, unless you really want to be a booker, it sucks, you know, especially when you're doing it for yourself. It's very stressful. And then there's also there's this expectation to, you know, like, okay, I was able to book my band in this room. So now there's the expectation of filling up that room, or are you going to sound good in there and stuff like that. So, and that kind of energy starts to take away from the artistic energy, and things kind of start to become really tough. And so we've gotten lucky that we've gotten some people with interest in booking us. And right now we're working with, what are they called?
I forget the name, but it's a fairly new company out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
Marcus, I forget. We met him in last South by Southwest, right?
Yeah.
Was it New Era?
Oh, right.
Something like that.
New Era, I think
New
it's what
Era.
it's called.
New Era.
We should know. but you know, it's like really a brand new thing, that so now we can relax, you know, and kind of hope that they take care of the job properly, because booking is a lot of work. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of knowing who to talk to, knowing how to talk to them, how to present yourself, how to present your value, and then how to negotiate what's actually going to go down.
Or even accept
You know.
rejection, you know?
Yeah, and
That's
accept
tough.
rejection too, big time. So, but also being persistent. And so it's just a lot of work, and it sucks. I don't recommend it. I really recommend, like, you know, if you really feel you got something good musically, look for outside work, unless you like for outside help is what I mean. Like, as far as booking, look for a booking agency or whatever. Because if you really are a good band, then you're really putting that conviction out there,
Mhm.
somebody's going to pick up on it at some point, you know. And part of having that conviction and being a band is not giving up and keep going and keep going and keep trying it and keep trying it. Because eventually somebody's going to catch on to it. Somebody's going to see that and they're going to be in a position to be able to help. And luckily that happened with us last South by Southwest, where we met this gentleman, and a year later he's like, hey, why don't we do something, get you guys on the road into some shows and some festivals and stuff like that. Now we don't have to worry about that.
And did he see you guys live? How did that happen?
Yeah, he was stage managing at our show for South by Southwest. It was last year, right?
last year,
Yeah, at the
yeah.
Continental Club. And he
Okay.
really enjoyed it. You know, he really enjoyed it. And to think where the band has developed into from then to now, you know, and he hasn't seen us in all that year,
Mm.
you know, so it's pretty cool that he believed in us then and hasn't seen us in a year and is still like, hey, like, let's do this, you know.
This is how it happens, folks. You got to really understand this, that if you put yourself out there, like Andy from Tomar and the FCs was talking about this last week, it's like everything that's happened to them was like by accident. It was just like they're putting themselves out there, they're playing a show, and somebody happens to see the show. Somebody dropped out of Bonnaroo, and the person who was happened to be there, and you know, and like, hey, will you guys play this slot Bonnaroo? Like all these things happen because you're putting yourself out there, making yourself available. I know from, you know, I produced South by Southwest Music Festival for 6 years, and that person who was your stage manager was most likely a volunteer.
Mhm,
Who's
exactly.
coming up because they love music and they're trying to get involved, and you just never know who the person is going to be. If there's one person in the audience, just play that show as fucking well as you can, because you just, you know, you just got to do it. You just got to have that conviction, like you were talking about, that conviction.
Yeah,
So fun. I love hearing these kind of stories. Now a lot of people have trouble because, you know, somebody's not just going to book your band. Like if your band is new and you're just kind of getting out there and you're working on your audience and you're developing relationships with clubs, it's unlikely that managers or bookers are going to go, hey, I want to work with you, because they've got to be thinking about, I need to make money for my effort. So they're picking bands that they can see are potentially going to make them money. Right. So there's that transition time between when you're doing it yourself and it's hard, to where you find this person. And you talked about a little bit about, you know, just, you got to keep going and, you know, having that grit and determination to keep going. What, yeah, tell us a little bit about like that transition for you guys. Like how long were you booking yourselves before, you know, it was a year and a half? What was going on? Just any information you can help. So give people a little bit of hope.
well, I think it happened between like the three of us having our own connections around town. We haven't really played too much out of town. Dylan has had some connections like in East Texas, like going out to Galveston and stuff. We've played a show there, and through his connection too, I guess through him being in the blues scene and stuff like that, we've gone like on a blues cruise and stuff like that. Other than that, it's just been our connections in Austin of like, hey, you know, like we have connections to Hotel Vegas, Continental Club, Sea Boys, Antones, all, you know, all these venues that were just like, you know, luckily we have a good rapport as musicians with other bands.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of just like that, you know, like we just having those connections and making those relationships with your local scene and your local musicians and helping each other out and all that stuff. That's a good way to start. That's a good way to start getting your name out there to, you know, for people to be like, oh, who is this? Or, you know, I have this band that I want to bring on, these friends of mine,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, put them in a room that they've never been in, you know, and, you know, the cream always rises to the top, right? So it's like, if your band is good, eventually somebody's going to catch on to it. But yeah, we were just doing it ourselves, really, just through our connections.
Great. So if you're listening and you're trying to figure this out, go out in the scene, meet the bookers, meet the other bands, become friends, just build a network of friends in the scene. That's the best way to get going, because and think about the long game. It's a long game, right? It's like,
Yeah.
don't
I mean,
rush.
it could be a short game too if you want it to be, you know, but if you don't want it to be, it's a really long game, you know.
Why short game by like just giving up, or what? What do you mean?
Right, or just be, because I've met a lot of musicians that were in bands, and then after some point they just stopped doing it, like, and
Yeah.
they followed another career or something like that, even though they were really good at what they were doing.
Mhm.
It's not for everybody. It's a very unique lifestyle for sure.
Yeah, I've tried to give it up. It just keeps coming back. It's like a gift or a haunting. I'm not sure, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and being early.
That's
Try
our
to be
first.
early.
We were early
Yeah.
at being late.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
James, thanks for having us,
Thanks
man.
for having
Yeah,
us.
it's so good to
Yeah, this is
connect
really
with
cool.
you guys. If you haven't checked out JeTexas, man, do it now. Go to Spotify, download it, buy the records, go to their website. What's the website?
Texas official.
.com. JeTexasofficial.com.
JeTexas, J-E Texas.
Yeah, JeTexasofficial.com. No apostrophe or anything like that. You're not allowed.
Not allowed on internet language.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, definitely go check these guys out if you haven't already. If you're a fan, just keep fanboying out like I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah, check out
Thanks,
the
James.
record. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff, all the streaming stuff, and of course we have the social medias, the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all that. So come check us out there and see what's up.
Get on bands in town so you know when they're coming to your town, because they're going to be coming. Trust me. This band is coming to your town. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, man.
See you, man.
Yeah, really great to get to know you. Peace.
Sure.
Likewise.